Hello, it is the end of the year, and so I'm gonna go through all of my favorite books that I've read this year. There's some books that are just like my favorite books that I've read this year, and I'll clarify when I'm talking about those ones. So starting with the first book that I read the year, I started off with one that like really hit hard, and it's Starling Venom. As you're experiencing the love that's forming, the love story that's forming, you're also just grieving someone the entire book. It's like a mixed experience that I was not ready for because I didn't read the front of the book that says my first love ended in tragedy, my second began with his brother. Didn't read that, didn't know the first one was gonna end like that, and then like literally a couple chapters in and I was like crying and devastated, and I just never got over it. It is just really beautiful and the message is amazing, and I also feel like the author's a genius because like the way that it's written and then the fact that like there's like a book within the book. I don't know, it's so cool. And like if you look closely at the cover, it's like written on, there's like, I forget if this is a book or a letter that's written on the cover, but there's just like so much amazing writing in this book and I really recommend it. Also, I just love the characters. I love them. They're like, they feel like close to my heart. I'll just like set them on my bed when I'm done with them. This one is one of my like absolute favorites, and I'm about to show you another one. I'm like seeing how a lot of them are like in the beginning of the year. Another one of like my absolute favorites is You Deserve Each Other. This is a romance comedy book, but it's also like, it has that emotional depth to it, but it also is very funny and I was laughing a lot through it. It's a like realistic type of second chance, and I just say that because I like, it's not exactly that it's realistic because not everything that happens in it is realistic, but the characters themselves have like these bad habits and qualities, and they're just not really dealing with problems in the relationship the right way. They're just doing a lot of the wrong things, but they're like petty things, like things that I feel like happen a lot in like real life. So it takes like that problem of like these little things just like building up and building up in a relationship, and it one makes it like so funny to read like as like an outsider looking in at their relationship, and two, it's like about two people just like getting over themselves in order to be better for one another and just change and evolve, and it's so beautiful. My next favorite book is one of my favorites as well. This one just has a special place in my heart, and it's a YA fantasy book. It's from the Prison Healer series, and this is the second book, and I just really enjoyed this book. You know that feeling when you read a good book and you're just like wow, and you're just sitting there like in awe for a second? That definitely happened for me with this book. I'm like having trouble remembering the entire plot of it because I read the third one and now they're like all kind of a little bit jumbled together, but I specifically remember like absolutely loving this one. There's romance, there's found family, there's magic, there's royalty. It's a really unique, cool story. I've never read anything quite like this. The third and the second books were my favorite of the series, but I feel like this second book had the best pacing out of all three of them, and it's just like that's something that really takes any book like up to the next level for me. I really need a good mix of events to keep me like hooked in like the right timing, you know, and it really had it. Okay, so this is one of my favorite books of all time. Literally all these like first ones I'm like, oh yeah, this is one of my all-time favorites, this is one of my all-time favorites, so I promise they're not all like that. Some of them are just like my favorite books that I've read this year, but not like my all-time favorites. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren was just an eye-opener for me with romance. Like I didn't realize I could be this obsessed with a romance book. You Deserve Each Other, I love that one. This one I could not stop reading. I feel like I expect more from romance because of this book, because it had that like, it's like, oh, it's such a good feeling when you're reading a book, and a romance book specifically, and they have just like that perfect mix. This happens and this happens, and it's like a dip in emotions, and then you're like, oh my god, but that was so cute. But you know when you have like the, like your heart literally hurts from just like feeling so much? This book did that so well, and I just feel like I just expected more after I read this one. I was like, I need more books like this one. So yeah, Love and Other Words, it's amazing. I feel like so many people have read it now because, you know, it's got a lot of hype and it deserves it because it's so good. And I'm still not over how two authors can write a book like and it be so seamlessly beautiful and amazing. I don't understand how two different people can work on the same thing and then it just flows together. Like I can't tell the difference between the chapters. The next book that I really enjoyed, but this is not like one of my all-time favorites, I just really enjoyed this one, is Sally Rooney, Conversations with Friends. This is just one of my favorite reads of the year because it was so different from anything that I've ever read, and it was like addictive. I couldn't stop reading it. I had a new appreciation for this type of writing. Sally Rooney just like knows how to write human thoughts. I feel like she writes them so well. It was so interesting just feeling like I was literally in someone else's mind because it felt so accurate to a real person that could exist, and I think that's partly because I've had thoughts like Francis's thoughts, and like everyone probably has, because they just felt so honest and real and not like made for entertainment, even though they were so entertaining. This book is also pretty sad. Like, it's like depressing. It's depressing to read the thoughts in this book. One of my favorite books that I've read this year is The Housekeeper and the Professor. This one, it's strange because like it's not normally one where I'd be like, oh my god, this was like my favorite book. But the fact that like I think about it so often, I feel like it deserves a place. It's kind of boring if I were to try to read it all in one night. But when I read it, like how I read it in like snippets whenever I was like doing something, or like whenever I was like going somewhere, like in a car or a bus or like a plane, I'd be reading this. And it really felt like a friend when I was like around and on my own and stuff. It deserves props for making me find math so interesting and numbers so interesting, because let me tell you, that is hard to do for me. I would describe this book as beautiful, peaceful, like a hug. The next books that are my favorite, I'm really excited to talk about because I just like miss them. Like, I love them so much. So I don't have the physical copies. The entire trilogy of The Summer I Turned Pretty, I loved them all. These books were so comforting to me, have just like such good vibes to them. Like, I want to transport myself to that beach house. The reason why The Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy is like one of my favorite books is because it just made me happy. Like, simply, that's it. It made me happy. And I just love the summery vibes of it. It was such a good time. I love the love triangle. I usually don't like them that much, but you know what, I really actually kind of enjoyed it. Okay, next up is one of my like top favorites. Some Mistakes Were Made. This is a book that shocked me. I had heard like almost nothing about it. I think I saw like one video about it before I read it. I did have a feeling I was gonna love it, and boy was I not wrong. Like, I loved it so much. I wanted to reread it for the first time again and again and again, and like I usually don't have that feeling with books, even if I really like them. It's a YA romance book, and it, oh my god, the amount of like yearning and angst and tension, like I love that in a romance book. Like, why else am I reading it, you know? Like, I want the drama. It is also, you can tell I like second chance because it's another second chance. This book always had just the right amount of things happening and just to pull me in, you know? And the writing was amazing. It was simple, direct, honest, entertaining. Like, it just pulled you in, but it was also beautiful at times. It was just so good. Anyway, I recommend it. You should read it. Some Mistakes Were Made. I loved it. And if you saw like my summer reading vlog where I like read 7 books in 7 days or whatever, you will see how I freaked out about this book, because I was actually freaking out. I was having a moment. Okay, next up, we are nearing the end of the books that were my favorites this year. The Ballad of Never After. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I think it's a trilogy because there's another book coming out. This has Jax, the Prince of Hearts from the Caraval series. He's like a side character who is probably like a fan favorite because he's so fun and cool, and he was like one of my favorite characters on it, and he's like in this book. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of like the Damon from Vampire Diaries. He reminds me of like the Damon of that world, and like going into this book, like not literally that type of character, but he's like more heartfelt honestly than Damon is maybe. But he's like the sarcastic side character, and then his heart was broken, and that's why you're starting off in this book with everyone that he kisses dies unless they're like his one true love. But his one true love didn't love him back. She didn't choose him. So he's starting this book and he's just like devastated. You're also starting the book with a girl who also had her heart broken. So they're kind of on like their broken heart journey. I think it's a really cool concept, and Stephanie Garber's writing always amazes me. And it's so magical, whimsical, fairy tale-esque. Okay, next book is It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. Oh, also, I should say, I don't know if I already said it for this book, but these two are like in my favorites list. It Starts With Us was just so beautiful, heartfelt, talked about like really difficult topics in such a beautiful, considerate way. I loved the new relationship dynamics that came into this book. It's the second, like a sequel to It Ends With Us, and the author released this one. It's not really like a book, it's more like the ending to a story that was already started in the first book. People like were wanting to see Lily and Atlas happy together. So that is exactly what the author did, but there's also still things that they're going through and working through. This book was like a very emotional read for me too. Like, it wasn't just happy and fluffy, it was also like so heartfelt that I teared up multiple times. If you just like seeing characters overcome things and be very happy, then you should read this. The last book I want to talk about is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I listened to the audiobook. Jeanette McCurdy, she narrates it herself, which I absolutely loved. I was so happy that I listened to it, so I really recommend it. But I also think it would be amazing reading it too, because it's just a really interesting book. It's honest, it's like has humor in it because she's funny. It's pretty devastating at times. There's a lot of difficult subjects in it. This book made me realize that I could really like autobiographies, which I didn't think I'd ever be interested in books like this. This is like the first one that I've read. So that is the end of my favorite books of 2022. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of me talking about books, and I will see you in the next one.